We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got one more DNR person coming. They should be here shortly. Emily Quant, who's putting this on through the Conservancy, is stuck in traffic. Can you imagine that? And so she should be here in a few minutes. I'm Chuck Bryant with the HOA. So this is Rebecca Cavalier from the DNR. She's going to be doing the presentation, and she'll answer all your questions. And Michelle Paul is out here on the phone. But,
do you have to press any buttons in?
If you have any questions later on after she leaves, just get with us and we'll try to get you some answers. Rebecca?
All right. All right, well, thank y'all all for being here. Like you said, my name is Rebecca Cavalier. I am one of the alligator biologists for Department of Natural Resources. My boss, Morgan Hart, who should be getting here shortly, she's the project leader in between us. We are really the only two that deal 100% with alligators. We have several people throughout the state who help us, but it's just two of us really kind of spearheading the whole thing. I'd like to apologize. I didn't think until earlier today that this being outside, y'all probably wouldn't be able to see the projector. So I apologize for that. I'll try to get us through it with no visuals. Hopefully y'all don't leave halfway through because it's boring. One thing I do want to mention before I get started is that I'm sure we're all aware that there was a fatality last week. Things are still under investigation, so we're not able to answer any specific questions about specific incidences in the past. But at the end of the presentation, I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions that y'all have about alligators. And this presentation is not trying to make light of any past incidences. It's more of a general, broad alligator education, behaviors, ways to kind of avoid negative interactions with them kind of presentation. That's kind of what I went through. So just the purpose of this presentation is just to go through alligator behaviors and histories, ways that we can avoid negative interactions with them and kind of peacefully coexist with them, especially in coastal areas like this where we are constantly interacting with them and they're constantly moving into our neighborhoods. And then I'll go through a kind of a brief overview of what we do in the Department of Natural Resources to manage for alligators in the state. So when you think of alligators, some people may think of the beautiful products that their hides make, like the purses and the belts and the shoes. Others may think of the delicious meals that we can get from their meat, like the yummy nuggets that taste like chicken. But on the other end of that is, you may think of all the news stories that seem to be just constantly increasing as we go on about our lives. And they can range anywhere from monster alligator roaming the neighborhoods or monster alligator eats another alligator. And then they can go to the severe bites and incidents. A lot of these news stories, they tend to stem from a general misunderstanding and fear about alligators and just not knowing what their normal behaviors are and what abnormal behaviors are and ways to just kind of mitigate any negative interactions. And so kind of what we try to do is get as much information out there as we can about them. And again, what's normal for them to do and what's not normal, in the hopes that we can kind of alleviate a lot of this misunderstanding or the misconceptions about them, while also promoting public safety. So a bit of history about alligators. In the 1960s, they were hunted to near extinction levels for their hides and their meat. And so they were placed under federal protection for several years, I believe like 20 or so years, to allow the populations to rebound and stabilize. Once they stabilized, they were removed from federal protection, but as of today, they are still federally and state managed, and that's why any and everything alligator related has to go through us as a state agency. So you may ask yourself, why are they important? Why do we even care about them? Ecologically, they are a keystone species. So one example is they create habitat, and their very presence in an environment heavily impacts all other species living in that environment. So they can create habitat and they'll dig out these holes with their snouts and their feet. The holes will fill with water during rainy periods, and then they'll retain that water during periods of drought. And this may be the only water source for several miles for not just them, but all other critters living in the area. They also have this mutually beneficial relationship with wading birds, where the birds will choose to nest over areas where alligators live or they habitat frequently. And the presence of the alligator down in the water kind of prevents and deters other predators like snakes and raccoons from climbing up into the tree and completely wiping out all of the eggs or the chicks. But if the occasional egg or chick falls out of the tree, the alligator's there waiting with its mouth open for a nice little snack. But it's been shown that the presence of that alligator seriously improves the survival rate of the bird's young. So it's very beneficial for both of them. They also control prey populations, and what we see a lot, especially on golf courses, and what I hear a lot about are geese. If an alligator's around, it's very likely there are no geese. But if that alligator leaves or it's removed, the geese are going to show up and bring their own version of chaos and destruction that they do. So they're very helpful there. They're also a great economic resource through our public hunt program. Our public alligator hunt is one of the most popular hunt programs, if not the most, in South Carolina. So people are coming from all over the United States to try to hunt alligators here. Last year we had over 9,000 applicants. And so it's not only a great economic resource for us as an agency, but also local businesses like the hunting guides, our local processors, who get a lot of business from our hunt. But on the other end of that spectrum, we have people who like to come over from all over the place to view wildlife, view the alligators in their natural environment, because it's not something that they get to do where they're from. So a wide variety of reasons of why we care about them and why we try to manage them to maintain these stable populations while promoting the public safety. So alligators in the United States can be found anywhere from the southern tip of Texas along the coast up into North Carolina. But in South Carolina, they can be found anywhere below the fall line. And if you could see this beautiful map.
This is South Carolina,
yes.
Here's the fall line, and this is the coast.
So it's basically the entire southern part of the state. They can be found in any freshwater habitat. Occasionally you can find them in saltwater habitats like the ocean, whether they're moving from one location to another or they're slipping into these saltwater habitats for a nice little meal. But they do prefer the freshwater. And then community ponds and golf course ponds are very important for juvenile alligators, because once they reach about 3 to 4 feet, mama's taking them out, they're on their own for the first time, they're looking for a new place to call home. So they're looking for these smaller retention ponds that have enough food for them, but it's also not big enough to where these 8, 10, 12 foot alligators are going to move in, because the large alligators will fight and eat the smaller ones. And so that's why you often see, the 3 to 7 foot alligators moving into your neighborhood ponds. So alligators are the only crocodilian species native to South Carolina. We don't have crocodiles here. We've very rarely had a crocodile show up in South Carolina and it was a released pet, but they simply just can't survive the winters here. It gets too cold for them. So crocodiles only occur in the southern tip of Florida. So if you see something out there and you're like, is it an alligator? Is it a crocodile? It's an alligator. There's 2 ways you can tell the difference between them. Alligators have this really rounded U-shaped snout, and when their mouths are closed, you can only see the top set of teeth. Whereas crocodiles have a very pointy V-shaped snout, and when their mouths are closed, you can see the top and bottom teeth. So they look a lot meaner because they're skinnier, they're bonier, and when their mouths are closed, they look like they have twice as many teeth as alligators do. Now, what do they eat? Anything with meat, anything they can get their mouths on. The size of their food depends on the size of the alligator. So they'll start off life, they're about 9 inches long, eating tadpoles, aquatic insects. And as they grow up, so do their meal sizes. They'll eat frogs, fish, turtles, birds, other alligators. The really large alligators occasionally eat deer. Like I said, really anything with meat that they can get their mouths on. And occasionally this does lead to them eating pets, eating dogs and cats. And that's why we really like to preach keeping your pets on a leash and well away from the edge of the water. Alligators are ambush predators, meaning that they hunt from the edge of the water. They'll use their tail to kind of propel them out to grab their prey. So the further you keep your pets away, the better. They like to primarily hunt from the edge of the water and in the water, so they don't make a habit of hunting on land. And so like all reptiles, they are ectothermic, meaning they're cold-blooded and they need the sun's heat to essentially function. They use it to digest their food, to maintain their body temperature, to get energy to move around, to eat. Really, they need it to do it all. So to do this, they bask, and you've probably seen a basking alligator when they're out on the edge of the pond in an open area, and they're just sunning. They're laying there, they're hoping that you leave them alone, and as soon as they get the heat that they need and the energy they need, they're back in the water. Occasionally you may come across one and it looks like they're giving you a little side eye. Again, that's just them keeping an eye on you, making sure you're staying well away, because they want to be left alone when they're basking. They feel very vulnerable on land. Occasionally you may have also seen them doing it with their mouths open. This is very similar to a dog panting. It's helping them regulate all that heat they're intaking and maintaining their body temperature. Again, a basking alligator is not a hunting alligator. It's really just trying to sun, mind its own business, and hoping you leave them alone. But if you ever come across one, you just want to back away, keep a nice distance, and just make sure you're not between them and the nearest body of water, because if they feel frightened, they're going to be hightailing it for the water, and you want to make sure you're not in their way. So some typical normal alligator behaviors, again, that's basking, eating its natural prey. It may not be very pleasant to see them eating the ducks and the turtles in your pond, but it's what they eat, and we all need to eat. Bellowing is also a normal behavior. You may have heard an alligator bellow in springtime. It's that deep rumbling noise that the males make. It's a mating call. He's basically screaming out saying, "Hey ladies, here I am, come and have me." It's not a hunting call. It's strictly a come and have me, ladies, I'm here. They also have this tendency to freeze on land when they're frightened. So if they're walking over land and they come across people, cars, something that kind of spooks them, they're likely to drop to the ground. And they're just going to wait you out. They're going to wait for you to back away, give them plenty of space, give them plenty of time so they can continue on. And that's usually why we find alligators stuck under cars. They were moving from maybe one pond to another, one water source to another. They got spooked and they just dropped, and they were like, I'm going to wait for all of these freaky things to leave, and then I'm going to keep moving. Because again, they feel safest in water. When they're on land, they do enjoy traveling over land, but they want to get to water as quickly as possible. Now, some nuisance behaviors for alligators. It's one of any size that it's lost its fear of people, so it's regularly approaching people or pets. It's likely a result of it being fed, whether directly or indirectly. And indirectly feeding an alligator could be feeding the wildlife in your pond. You're either gathering all of their normal meal items in one location for them to easily snatch, or they see you handing out free food and they're like, I need to get in on this action. And all it takes is once, and then they will always associate people with food. Other nuisance behaviors are when they're in places they're not supposed to be and drawing a large crowd. So blocking roadways, obstructing traffic in a really crowded, populated place. These are all nuisance behaviors, and we'll kind of go more into that later about how we manage for that. So I wish you could see this slide to take a picture of it, but it's highlighting their behaviors based off of season. So in springtime, they're coming out from the winter, and their movement is crazy. April, May, June, they are moving all over the place. They are looking for food, they're looking for mates, and the juveniles are looking for new homes. Summertime, about this time, the females are starting to slow down. They're building their nests and they're laying their eggs. About August time is when the eggs will hatch. And one piece of advice I always like to give people is if you ever come across baby alligators, they're very cute. They're 9 inches long. They look like lizards. You mistake them for a lot of things. If you ever come across baby alligators, stay well away. Mama alligators are very protective of their young and they will defend them. And that's because everything eats baby alligators, even other alligators. So once she starts hearing them call for her, she's coming running. Whether she's just sitting under the water watching them, she could be on the other edge of the pond. Whether or not you see her, she's there. So just stay well away from baby alligators, despite how cute they are. And in the winter, they go into their version of hibernation. It's called brumation. It's not quite like bears. So bears will go dormant for the winter. Alligators aren't quite dormant. They're just kind of hunkering down for the winter, trying to stay out of the cold because the air temperature is too cold for, again, their body to function. Again, they need that heat. You may occasionally see them come out on a particularly sunny day or a particularly warm week during the winter, but for the most part, this is why they essentially disappear from late October to early April. So there's one way you can kind of estimate how big an alligator is. The amount of inches from between the snout to between the eyes, each inch equals about a foot. So if it looks like snout to eyes is about 8 inches long, it's about an 8-foot alligator. Now this is a very rough estimation. We certainly don't want y'all getting close enough to get an accurate. We'd much rather you tell us the wrong size than something else happen. But it at least helps narrow down about how big it could be. So you can narrow it down to, oh, it's a 2 to 4 foot alligator, or oh, it's 8 to 10 foot. So it at least helps narrow down the range of what it could possibly be. And then their size says a lot about them. So they reach sexual maturity and adulthood once they hit about 6 feet in length. And that takes them anywhere from 9 to 16 years to reach. So they are a very slow growing and slow maturing species. But they also can live a very long time. I mean, they can live in the wild for 40 to 60 years, possibly even longer. I mean, there are alligators in captivity that have lived longer than 80 years. So they're very similar to humans in the aspect that we're a very slow growing species, but we both can live a very long time. In South Carolina, the females tend to max out at about 9 feet and some change, and the males at about 13 feet. So we don't get those 14, 15-foot alligators like Florida and Louisiana do, thank goodness. Also, the juveniles tend to be a lot smaller than they appear. So you may have heard that for nuisance alligators, our cutoff tends to be about 4 feet and below, where we don't permit for nuisance alligators, with exceptions, of course. And this is because at 4 feet, they're maybe 10 to 15 pounds. So they're a lot lighter and a lot skinnier than they appear. And because of that, we appear to them a lot larger than we actually are. And so unless they've been fed or they've become used to people for some other reason, those 4 feet and smaller still have this natural tendency to be afraid of people just because we seem so large and threatening to them. And because other than larger alligators, humans are their only threats. And so some questions we typically get asked, do you run from an alligator and do you run in a zigzag? No to both. One, you don't want to run from an alligator because running increases your chances of tripping and falling. And you don't want that to happen if you're near an alligator. But also, again, they don't make it a habit of chasing people down on land. They're ambush predators, they hunt from the edge of the water, so the further away you are, the better it is. If they're approaching people on land, it's because they've been fed, and those are the ones that we try to take care of as quickly as possible. But also not quite sure where the zigzag myth came from, because if you're running in a zigzag and they're just running straight, they'll catch up to you quicker than you hoped. So again, if you come across one on land, just back away slowly and put as much distance between you and it as you can. Another question we get is, can they climb fences? Yes. It's typically the chain link fences, just because those fences, they have something they can grab onto. And it's typically the smaller ones. The bigger they get and the heavier they get, the harder it is for them to support their weight with their little bitty arms. If they're climbing a fence and they end up in your backyard, they're not trying to stalk you or your pet. What they're doing is when they travel on land, they are very simple-minded. They are going to take the most direct route possible to wherever they're going. So if there's anything in their way, a fence, a car, a house, they're gonna try to go over, under, or through before they ever think to go around. And so this is usually how they end up stuck in people's yards, or pools, or garages. They saw that obstacle and they're like, I'm just gonna go through, it's gonna disappear. And so that's why we say if that ever happens, open up all gates and doors, give them plenty of time to move on their own, because they will. If they're given the time, ideally overnight, they're going to find their way out, because again, they want to get back to water as soon as possible. And another question we get asked very frequently is, do we relocate? Can we relocate this alligator somewhere else? That's a no for several reasons. One of the big ones is they have this really strong homing instinct. So if they found a pond, or they found a certain square mile radius that they call home, they feel safe, they have regular food, they're not bothered by people or other alligators, you can move them several miles in one direction or the other, and they're just going to try to come back. And so now they're walking over roadways and other neighborhoods and parking lots and this and that, and they're just causing a lot more problems than they originally were. But also, if it's a nuisance alligator and it needs to be removed, it's a nuisance alligator in one location, it's going to be a nuisance in another. And so that's why they do have to be euthanized if they have to be removed. Now, for such a large predator species, they do face several threats themselves. One of them being the unregulated hunting and poaching, which nearly brought them to extinction in the 60s. And that is compounded by their life history, the fact that they grow so slowly and it takes such a long time for each generation to contribute and help grow the population. But what we see a lot is habitat loss, especially in coastal areas like ours, where the human population is just growing so quickly. And we're constantly developing on areas which used to be wild areas in these natural wetlands. And so two things are happening. Either the alligators are staying where they've always been, but what used to be a wetland is now a neighborhood with several ponds, or they're being displaced and they're having to travel to look for new homes. In both of these situations, it's increasing our interactions with them, because now we're having to share the same space. And this can lead to this misunderstanding and these misconceptions about them, and it could lead to fear for them, especially if you're someone who's never encountered an alligator before and you don't know anything about them. So that's why why we're here. What we try to do is just, again, getting as much information about them and their behaviors out there as possible, and ways that we can try to peacefully live with them to both of our benefits. And so our goal is science-based management. We do several types of monitoring and studies on the species. We use what we know about them to inform our regulations, and everything alligator related is regulated. We are constantly trying to expand our education and our outreach. I started about a year and a couple months ago. Before me, it was just her. She was spearheading it all. And so now there's two of us, but again, it's two of us to educate the entire state. So we're constantly growing and learning and trying to expand what we're able to do. And then we have 3 removal programs, and I'll go into a bit of each of these. So some of the monitoring and studies we do, right now we're in the middle of our field season, so we're going out at night on public waterways all across the state, and we're doing our eye shine surveys. We are shining lights, trying to count how many alligators we see. Just kind of get a rough idea of where they're at in the state. But again, it's a rough idea because they move around so much. We may see an alligator there one night and it's not there the next, or vice versa. We also do GPS tagging, where we'll put a GPS on an alligator and we'll monitor their movement for a couple of years and just see where they go, when they're traveling, where they're traveling, how far they're traveling in a day. And then we do mark recapture studies on our properties, where we'll capture an alligator, we'll mark them, kind of similar to like a cow's ear tag. And then we'll just get as much information about them as possible. How big they are, if it's a male or female. If it's a female, is she nesting? And then we'll release them. And then we continue to do this. And the really cool thing about them is, since they live so long, we can catch that same alligator 1 year, 5 years, 20 years in the future. And they could still be thriving. And then we can see how they've been doing. Have they grown any? Have they gotten any new kind of injuries or deformities? If it was the nesting female last time, is she still nesting? So it's really helpful to kind of get a better understanding of individuals within the species, but also kind of how they work. Some of the regulations that we have, it is illegal to feed or harass an alligator. And harassing an alligator can really be anything, throwing rocks or sticks at it, trying to poke it, trying to pick it up, trying to touch it. Really anything that is getting you too close to an alligator and getting that alligator too familiar with humans can be considered harassment. It's also illegal to kill or possess an alligator without the proper permitting, which again goes through us. And both of these you can be found guilty of misdemeanors and you can be fined for them. Some of the education outreach that we do, we have a couple of alligator signs. I'm sure y'all have the big yellow alligators live here signs posted about. We also have these new no feeding signs that strictly say feeding is dangerous and illegal. Don't do it. Here's the number you can report your neighbor. Sometimes that helps. We have several new handouts that we've been working on that y'all have, and I think we put the others up on that front table, so feel free to grab. We've updated our website to include new and updated information about them. Really just anything about how they work, their behaviors, tips to avoid nuisance situations in your neighborhoods. And then just trying to do as many community presentations like this as we can. So we have 2 hunt programs, the public hunt, which is open for anyone to apply, in-state or out-of-state. It is a lottery style system, so only 1,000 tags are drawn, and the more times you apply, the more likely you are to get selected. It runs only for 1 month, and like I mentioned earlier, we had over 9,000 applicants last year, so very popular. And I believe we had at least 1 applicant from 48 states. So like I said, they're coming from all over to hunt here. We also have the private lands hunt, which is for landowners that have large amounts of land and large alligator populations. And this is more of a long-term management goal for them, where they can manage and hunt the particularly nuisance and troublesome alligators on their property while still maintaining stable and healthy populations. And then our third removal is the nuisance program. A lot of this I already touched on, but just to recap, nuisance alligators are those of any size that have lost their fear of people, or those that are in places they shouldn't be. If an alligator is considered to be a nuisance, it will be euthanized, and you do require a permit and a tag to do so. The good thing about communities like this with HOAs and property management groups, the HOA is responsible for obtaining that permit and tag and then getting someone out there getting them out here to remove the alligator. So a couple things you can do as an individual just to kind of avoid any negative interactions. The biggest is just to be aware of your surroundings when you're nearby water. Keeping your pets on a leash and well away. If you know an alligator is in your pond, don't let your pets or kids into the pond. Don't go fishing. Don't throw any trash, fish scraps, food into the pond, because that will attract them and keep them around. Whether or not you know an alligator is around, avoid feeding any wildlife like the fish and the turtles. Again, all it takes is them seeing you giving out free food once, and they're here to stay. Some things that the HOA and management can do is just educating their residents as much as they can. Putting on presentations like this, putting up signage, handouts, newsletters, and then managing for the nuisance alligators on a case-by-case basis within their properties. And that is all, because I had a visual to show what we mean when we say that alligators move around very frequently, but I guess we won't be able to see that. So another thing is, so I am a nuisance alligator coordinator, but not for your county. I am the nuisance coordinator for the upper coastal part of the state. You have a different coordinator, so if any of you would like their office number, if you ever have any questions or concerns, you can give them a call and they'll be more than happy to help you out. So if you would like that number, feel free to come and see me at the end, which is now. So that is what I have for y'all. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Chutes Lake, which is the upper reaches of the Ashley River, is a popular fishing spot. And over the past year or so, I assume what's happened is the alligators are associating a person standing on the bank with a fish in distress. And they would simply sit out there staring at you while you're fishing. And if you catch a fish, they hone in on it like a rock.
Yeah.
And if you're doing catch and release, you might as well be throwing them a ham sandwich.
Right.
So basically, you're feeding the alligator if
Yep.
you're doing catch and release.
Oh, you're correct.
So they're there and they pass.
Exactly. And that's what they like about people who fish is they will wait for you to catch it and then they'll steal it because then they don't have to do the work. They don't have to chase after that fish and catch it. So they will, like you said, they'll wait and they know better. And even the ones that don't know better, they see the cork bobbing and they think, oh, maybe this is a fish, and that's why they end up going after your lines as well. So, I mean, you nailed it on the head.
Solutions for that would be, we do have, hi, I'm Morgan. So sorry I was late. There was a wreck on 526. I'm the alligator project leader, and like you said, I've been doing this a while by myself, but now have some help, which is awesome. If these alligators are in a public waterway, which sounds like they are, they're on the Ashley River, we do have agents, emergency response agents, that can remove and euthanize those particular alligators. The long-term solution would be to close fishing in those areas, because there's no way to tell that alligator, hey, this fish isn't for you, right? The new alligators are going to come in as soon as you remove the ones that have learned that fishing is how they get food. And then, so it's just the only solution is either to close fishing completely or make sure that anyone who fishes there is well educated about what to do if there's alligators nearby. So stopping fishing when alligators approach.
Another thing, I was fishing at Simmons Pond, which is one of the old dirt mines here in the neighborhood, just last year. And I was fishing with live bait, live minnows. And a baby alligator came up on me. And I'd say it couldn't have been more than 18 inches. And I want to say it was probably considerably less than that. So you're saying Mama Alligator was watching me the whole time?
She could have been, yeah. Whether you see them or not, she's around. Sometimes they do kind of go off on their own to, the moms want to get their own meal, take a little break. But she's tuned into their chirp. And as soon as they start calling for her, she's coming. And so, yeah. Whether you see her or not, it's likely she's around.
The live minnow struggling to the water was like a dinner bell.
Yeah. Yep. And at that size, they're learning how to eat. Yep. Yes.
So then, like, if you're fishing down at the ponds here, and you catch a fish, and you see like there's a gator, right? And you're able to pull it in, but you're gonna release it. What's the best? Like, you go somewhere, walk away where the gator can't see you, and then put the fish back in the water. Or
Yeah, especially if you're, sorry.
No.
Okay.
I was just saying the same thing.
If you're going to have to like hold the fish down in the water and let it revive at all, you're going to want to walk far away, move far away from that. Or if you can't do that, then you're going to give it a good chuck way out in the water, because you don't want that alligator coming up to you thinking that you have the fish, right? If you chuck it out there and he happens to eat it, that sucks, and also it's teaching him that people need food, but you are not going to get an alligator on your arm that was trying to get a fish, right? But yeah, the best case scenario is to walk as far away from where you were fishing as you can to release the fish, and then also stop fishing there for a undetermined amount of time, right? Until you can figure out what the alligators have left.
In the back. Yes, sir. Can someone repeat what he said?
Eat what?
do alligators don't do it on purpose?
Ooh, I'll let you.
So, what I was going to say before I was rudely kept from being here, no, they don't. And we're not going to talk about any of the fatalities that have happened over the course of the last 2 years. So, this is education for alligators in general, and, out of the mouths of babes. I'm sure that's the question that everybody wants to ask. Yeah, so no, they don't.
Yes.
So once mating season is over,
Mm-hmm.
and male male has done his job, does he stay with the female while she's nesting, or does he say, leave me alone, my baby's?
Basically that, yep. He does what he needs to do, and he's off on his own. He's back to wherever he decides he lives, and he's just minding his business, eating food and basking. And the mom's doing it on her own.
And individual males may make multiple females. You know, they try, like she said, the map we couldn't show you was actually one of our GPS tagged out adult male alligators during breeding season, who miles and miles up and down the river, back and forth over the course of just like a month or two. And that was him visiting all his ladies and then coming back to where he feels safest and where he can find food to hang out when he's not doing all that.
Yes, in the back.
What do you do if you're out like on a canoe or a kayak or a paddleboard and there's someone in the water?
This is what I want you to handle.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm going to speak.
Bless you.
So the question was, what should you do if you encounter an alligator in a canoe or kayak? So very occasionally alligators will confuse canoes or kayaks with other alligators because their vision is not the same as ours, so the colors that they see are not the same. However, I don't know if you saw the video from North Carolina where the alligator approached the guy on the kayak and he ended up tumbling over him to the side. It was terrifying to watch, right? But as someone who understands alligator behavior, for me, it was very clear that the alligator was trying to defend either her nest or her territory where he had kind of cornered her by accident. She bumped the front of his kayak. He panicked and fell over, and by the time he like scrambled back up in, she was gone. So they are not trying to pump you over and get at you. If you see one over here, just give it space. If it approaches you, just calmly back up and go the other direction. It's not. No, yeah, you're not going to get like a what was the movie Crawl where they're like jumping in the boat and stuff. No, I understand. If you don't know, you don't know, right? So no, they even if they thought it was something to eat or another alligator, their behavior is to approach it, kind of give it a little bump to see what it is, and then go, "Ooh, that's plastic, gross," and then swim away. So.
Are they nocturnal? When are they most active?
So they are most active at dusk and dawn.
Crepuscular is what that's called. Yeah. Achoo! Crepuscular. Yeah, active at dusk and dawn.
But you do frequently see them during the day, especially when it's sunny. Again, they like the sun, but especially like meal times and movement, they do prefer dusk and dawn. Yes.
That's a good leading question. I take my little dog out at night on a leash, and in front of my house, a gator was found in the pond, several weeks ago. It's been gone for a couple weeks.
Okay.
But at night, I take my dog out, and I'm probably 10 to maybe 20 yards away from the pond. And on a leash, would that gator be watching me to see a pattern?
It could be watching you. One reason they watch us is to see what we're doing and to making sure that we're staying well away.
I mean, like watching the dog, and then maybe sometime come up that far on the land.
That alligator is absolutely looking at that dog as if it's food.
Yeah.
Now, will it approach with you there? Probably not, but it's not impossible.
Okay, because there's a lot of seed grass.
Yeah. One thing you can do at night is wear a headlamp. Because a really bright headlamp will reflect in their eyes, and their eyes reflect orange, really bright orange. And it's different than any other. It's different than a raccoon or a dog. They reflect kind of silver or red. So that way you can also keep an eye on it, and it doesn't even know you can see it, right? Because you can see that eye reflection. And again, good distance from the pond, right? Keep the leash short and keep well away from the water.
I never let the dog release, but like I said, it's good 10 to maybe 20 yards away.
Right.
That I am.
And the good thing about the leash is it makes it so you can control the dog,
Right.
as opposed to keeping the alligator away. You can yank them if need be.
Now, say that alligator came on my property after the dog, and I shot it. Would that be legal for me to do?
There would be we would have to investigate. If you were defending your life, of course that's wrong. Right. Well, I mean, sure. Probably, I mean, if it were major, you know, it's going to depend on your law enforcement officer that you get, but the better course of action, though, is, you know, an ounce of preparation, right? So if you have an alligator that's regularly approaching your yard, you walk your little dog there, either you're walking your dog in the other side of the house, or you're getting your HOA to get tagged and have that alligator removed.
Well, that's what I did. When it was around, I walked in the
Yeah.
backyard.
Right,
instead of the front.
right.
Then you're prepared.
Yeah. One thing I want to stress that is, it's hard to hear as a dog owner, someone who loves my pets. If an alligator grabs your dog, like if you've got a dog on an extendable leash and if you didn't notice the dog went down to the water and an alligator has your dog, you let go of the leash. You do not fight back against an alligator for your dog. We did, you know, I think we all saw that video of the guy with a cigar in his mouth fighting the alligator for the little dog. That was like a 3-foot alligator. It is very hard to judge the size of an alligator in a panic moment, right? You may think it's a 3-foot alligator and it's an 8-foot alligator, and then we've had incidents where the dog's fine and the person is not. So do not fight an alligator for your dog.
Yes. Where are they most likely to nest in proximity to the water?
So I told her just to look at me and talk. So generally they're nesting as far away from people as they can get because they view people as predators and they're wanting their nest not messed with at all. And they are nesting, if it's a big deep pond, they're nesting pretty far back from the pond. Their ideal nesting situation is to have a waterway like a pond, a big pond or lake or whatever with plenty of food, you know, like a quarter of a mile away, and then they go back and they dig sort of a little ditch that fills with water, which is where the babies are going to first swim around when they first hatch, and then the female will then take them to the bigger waterway, and they're big enough to kind of hold their own against some wading birds and stuff like that. So generally it's going to be an area with some cover, some sun, wooded, and pretty far back from any really large waterways. They're not going to build a nest like out in the middle of the grass right next to the pond.
What do the nests tend to look like?
Yeah, once you've seen one, they're hard to miss. They are at least 3 feet across. They look like a giant rounded bird nest. They can be as tall as we are, or they can be smaller. They're built out of decaying plant matter, so grasses and sticks and leaves and whatever they can find. They use their back feet to push it up in a big pile. They put their eggs down in the middle of the pile, so covered over on the top, and the decomposition of the plant matter causes heat, which keeps the eggs warm, and that's how they, it's like a big compost pile to keep the eggs warm. So if you see it, like you can see them from the air if you're flying, like low flying over the area, because they'll be bigger around than this table with a big open area around them.
Like a crocodile?
Yep, very similar.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the safe distance to be away? Because can't they move pretty quickly?
They do, they run pretty quickly. However, their burst of speed, their run speed is an escape behavior. So they are running to go to the water. There's not a safe distance, right? It's going to depend on the alligator. It's going to depend on the neighborhood. I would say you need to stay at least 15 feet from the water. And if an alligator, the difference is, let's say you're 15 feet from the water, an alligator has been hand-fed, it's a big alligator, it runs up towards you on the bank. It's very rare, but it does happen. That alligator can't get you back in the water. So you might be bitten by that alligator, but the people who die because they're right on the edge of the water and they get pulled into the water. So the distance from the water may not make you 100% safe from every single alligator bite, but it is going to keep you safe from drowning, which is what alligators do. Yes, ma'am?
My understanding is that they have numerous amounts of eggs that they lay at one time. But I'm curious, what's the average and how often do they lay?
Yeah, so jump in
No.
if you want to answer anything.
You got the biological questions down.
So I'm so used to doing these myself that I jump in. Generally, females are laying once a year, maybe once every other year, depending on the age of the female and how fecund she is. They lay between 30 and 50 eggs. About 50 to 75% of those will hatch, but only like 10% of those babies reach maturity. So kind of like sea turtles. If so many things eat them, they just make a bunch of them so that a few of them survive.
All right. Oh, and like I mentioned earlier, I have some handouts, aside from the brochures, some papers I put them on the front table, so please grab one as y'all leave.